Alright everyone, I know we said we would be gluing at this point, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how much flash is on these rails. Let me hold this up close and see if we can get a shot at this. So you see that ridge? It's the underside, but there's a fair amount of it. And I'll show you a piece that I sanded. This is the forward stop for the tandem. So the tandems are going to slide in from the back, and the first will goes up to this stop. So you don't want to, make sure you don't sand that away. And then this is the edge that's going against the floor. And it's a little bit hard to see on this, but let's see if I hold this way. If you look like right here, this flash edge here. So all this we want to get flat. It goes all the way down. So here's where you can see, nice and smooth. So it does take some time to go through and take that edge off. You just want to get that edge off. You don't want to put any waves or bows in here. Don't go dig all the way down. What I used is this is a 180 grit sanding stick, emery board. This is actually if anybody has a female in their life, sister, mother, girlfriend, wife, they use these on their nails, and when they're done with them, you can take them, or just take them up front. This one is more like a 400 grit, or you can just buy sanding sticks. So this does a good job of taking down the edge. A couple other things that I'm going to wind up doing is, I noticed when I was test fitting the rear bumper to the body that I got to do some work to get this square. Wait a second. You can almost, if you look close here, you can almost see that the lower edge kicks out a little bit. So it's going to force this to not be a 90-degree angle. So I got to do some fitting to get this to work. So first I'm going to, you can see I gap if I'm trying to hold it at 90 degrees, and if I hold it flush in here, it's a little hard to get this to position, but it looks like it's going to need a little bit of work to get that right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to sanding and fitting, and then when I get that back edge square and the other steel beam here cleaned up, then we'll be back to glue. Alright, see you later. Hi everyone, welcome back to Rich's Garage. I know last time I said that we would be gluing right now, but I want to go over a few things that I ran into fitting wise. So last time we talked, I sanded these rails, the main beams, because I had a lot of mold line in them on both top and bottom. So we did that, got these in here. I'll just rough these in. So the next part was seeing if the side frames, for the tandems would fit, right? Because these have to slide along each of the rails. Now this is the interface. This side, I'm trying to show that one angle. So actually a little tight. Well, they're both tight. So right about here it gets a little snug now, and I can come up to the hard stop. Remember, we wanted to not sand this angle right here. I don't know if you can quite see. I don't want to take the rail off. Alright, we had the end stop where the tandem slides up against. So when cleaning up, right, make sure you don't sand that off. But when I went to put this one on, I could only get it to about here, right? So that's nothing. That's the first rib. The other side, I was able to slide about halfway on. Oh, let's see here. But now, no problem, right? And just to show you, right, so these are on here, right? I hold the rails. Well, you can't see because I'm going to turn it upside down, but they don't fall out, right? That's the key part, that they don't fall out. Because if you oversand, you're going to have a problem. So let's talk about what was going on here. First off, these are two halves. All right, let me see if I get to a good angle here for you. Okay. So you can see it's almost a 90, but not quite that right angle in there. The other part is these bosses were a little bit, I had to sand these down a little to get the clearance for this to slide. In addition, I had to lightly dress the edge of the beam to give the clearance. Now here's a little bit of something to keep in mind. Let me put these in. Now I measured from the end of the rail to the stop, and they're the same, so I know that that's even. I got these virtually. Oops, my square just fell. If I square this up against here, you can't quite see, but it's pretty much there. I mean, there's not much of a difference. I don't know if you could be able to see that anyway, but. So I cleaned up the end to get them so that everything's sitting even. Now, when you sand, keep something in mind. Once we glue in these cross members, right, this is going to be rigid. So what I was careful to do was slightly sand the edge of the beam, so that both beams, so that this would be moving in the same direction. So what do I mean by that? Well, if I cleaned up just the inside edge of both sides, let's say when these slide together that it gets to a tight spot. If I clearanced the inside and there was a little bit more material on the outside of both at the same time, this is going to want to spread. But it's not going to be able to spread because it's going to be fixed, because we're going to glue this in here. Right? So if all of a sudden it needs to open up more to slide, well, we've just basically nailed it in place. On top of it, we're going to be putting this in after we've painted this, so now we'd be stuck. The tandem wouldn't fit. But if you sand the opposite sides, so if you clearance this side and you clearance this side, well, if you have a little bit of a bow here and it pulls it this way, this is already clearance. It's going to allow this to push into it. So the tandem will do this, right? It'll rock back and forth instead of trying to spread. So as long as you keep that in mind, you'll be okay. The other thing is you have to do a little at a time. Don't just go in there and start sanding crazy because it's a tight fit. If you do that, you can see there's not a lot. This is going to be tough to hold because it's so flexible. But this ridge, this lip, right, is very thin. If you sand too much, you're going to take off too much of this rib. And doing that, your side frame won't have anything to hold on to. And it's going to fall off. So take a little bit off of the beam, take a little bit off in here. All right, you got to go back and forth, back and forth. But you see how I can, turn this upside down, shake it around, right? It's not going anywhere. Okay. But keep that in mind that you're going to be making a rigid member once you glue in these side pieces. So that's why it's important to do all your fitting before you start gluing things in. Now, if we follow the directions, right, and we said, okay, we're going to put the tandem together first, well, we'd lose our ability to fine-tune this. So then we'd be stuck, and, you'd be disappointed, right? So that's that part. Let's take these off. Let's look at the trailer deck. Okay. I had to do a fair amount of sanding. Actually, I sanded the whole side frame. There was a mold line that came across here. On one side, it almost looked like, maybe it was intended to be there, like a little relief in the side frame, but I don't believe so. and the stake pockets are going to cover this, the outside rails. But it was uneven, so I went through and I sanded it. Now these 3 little dimples, I can get a better shot here. Let's see here. Maybe you'll see them. And you can vaguely see there's one here, right? And then you come across, and where's that one? And there's one here, and then there's one up front. And they're set towards the rear of the deck. Those are locating pins, so you don't want to sand them off. That's what's going to locate the side rails. All right, so I cleaned up both sides, cleaned up the edges a little bit, and then we get to these little stake pockets. I spent 40 minutes per rail cleaning the flash off of them, and I was not dogging it. I was sanding the whole time. So, you know, you think about it, that's almost an hour and a half of just sanding. So when you have your limited time to work on a model and you're spending all your time on these little guys, it's, you know, it can be frustrating, but you know, I had the music going, so, and just worked through it. But basically I had to sand the top and the bottom. In some places, I'm going to put on my cable here. In some places the flash was so high it was even with the top of the stake pockets. So that's a little crazy. All right. You have 3 of these squares, excuse me, that go in the locating pins on the deck, and it's a tight fit. So it looks like, let me see, this is the wrong one. Maybe this one. Goes in there. Goes in there. And it's snug. So you wanna. This one actually is fitting a little bit better than the other side. But what we'll do is I'll glue, you know, hit them with the glue, come in, and then this one was the little bit snug one, and then get these to line up. So you see how it popped out that side. So I may, depending on how it lays down, take a little bit off of there or whatever. But you know, I want to get all these pieces in to try and get a feel for how the front bulkhead is going to fit, and the front end cap. So first I'll glue all this stuff in, and then I'll work on the front and see what that's going to look like. So once I got everything cleaned up again, I let it dry, and I just wanted to let you in on how much work was involved. So don't get discouraged. So if you don't clean this up, you know, if you look at the box, right? I mean, the rail is prominent. You're going to see all that flash, you know, up and down. So take the time. Be careful when you sand that you start off lightly, because it's thin, right? It can break. You don't want to break that, because then, you know, you'd have a tough time trying to make that a clean joint. So I'm going to get set up to glue, and I'm going to do one side at a time. I already did some preliminary measurements. Let me put this rail in. And you can't quite see, but there's a little bit of a bow in the rail. You can see I can push it down. So I'm going to start at one end, put some weights on to get the deck flat, then do by hand a little bit, use a little one of these micro applicators that you get, a little foam tip, a little micro brush, and I'll use this plastic struck Bonding solvent cement. One of the things of making sure everything's square is I'm going to come in, and from previous measurements, from the edge of the deck to the side of this beam when it's perpendicular is an inch. So I'll go through and measure, glue, hold, measure, glue, hold, go down, get this square. You know, it's a little bit tough to see here, right? But you can check that. But like I said, it's underneath here. It's about an inch to the side wall of that, right? Then once this rail is in, then I can check it and make sure that this is going in parallel to this, and then I know I shouldn't have any trouble. Once both rails are in, then I'll come in and put these in. This one. Everything's square, and then we can come in and put in the side pieces. So when we come back, we'll start gluing. So this time we are going to be gluing. Now I don't know how much you guys are really going to be able to see, but I'm just going to let it run and maybe edit out if it gets too long or whatever. What I wound up doing is clamping this to the edge of my workbench just on one side, and then I put the square and metal ruler on the other side just to give it some weight, and that seems to have flattened out the deck, so that's good news. I already had measured that I'm at 1 inch that I talked about from the edge here to the rail, so I'm just going to start gluing down and like I said before, pressing with my finger. I think I may try with the brush first, let's see, as opposed to the micro applicator, because I think I'm going to need a fair amount of solvent to get this to sit and not want to bow back up. So like you can see, it's going to be kind of boring. You're not going to see a lot. So I think I'm going to turn you guys off, go through, glue this down. I'll turn it on when I go to check the other rail, and we'll go from there. Okay, so this rail is glued in and it's not going anywhere. I'm going to unclamp this, flip it around, clamp the other side here, and then glue that side. Alright, so I'll be back after that's done.